Hello everybody, Steve Cunningham here, and today we are deep diving into something truly amazing, Chicago-style thin crust pizza. And when it comes to getting things right, one of YouTube's greatest epic fails. Virtually nobody on YouTube knows how to make a good Chicago-style thin crust dough. Yet people are posting videos left and right. They're treating the dough as if all you need to do is make it super thin, and that's all that matters. After years of scouring the internet, I've only found two YouTubers that have given me hope. Bill Cook from How to Cook and Chef Twan. And it's because they nailed that crust. When I found Chef Twan's Chicago-style thin crust recipe, I was truly excited. I'm going to give you a little glimpse into why I felt that way.
Oh man, that sounds so crispy. I can't wait to dig into this. All right, I'm gonna finish cutting this up, then I'm gonna take you to the dinner table and we're gonna give this pizza a try. All right guys, so here is my Chicago Tavern Style pizza. Thin crust, as you can see, it's already like crackling, breaking apart. I'm gonna take this corner piece right here. Actually, you know what? Everyone says to test out a Chicago style pizza, you gotta take a piece in the middle. So let's take a square piece here. You can see here, right? Looks pretty legit. Look at that, guys. Look at that crust on the bottom, nice char. All right, here we go. Cheers. That is really good. You can see the crust is flaking here. Oh man.
What Chef Twan just showed you is one of the keys to making a good Chicago-style tavern crust. And it's where pretty much everybody on YouTube fails. You gotta get those flaky layers. You gotta get those little air bubbles. That gets you that signature crunch, while at the same time a little bit of chewiness on the inside of the crust. Chef Twan absolutely nailed this cook. And I'm so glad that I found his video. While many content creators on YouTube, even some great ones, have missed the mark with this style of pizza, Bill Cook did not. I want to show you just a little bit of his video.
Okay folks, that is pizza. Now it goes down on a rack here, as you see the screen, because this dough is kicking off a ton of steam and everything else under this, so if we ventilate this, it stays crispy, and we made a crispy pizza, so we want crispy. And I have this camera and that camera and that camera. It's so pretty. Oh my god. Now I have one of these here. There, can you hear that crunch? Can you hear that? It's amazing. There we go, right down the middle. I hope the audio is picking that up because holy crap! That is some crunchy pizza, and we got some beautiful puffiness and some amazing things. And I'm going to show you this. Look at that lovely crust development. Oh yeah, that is insane. I know it's hot, but I'm going in. I don't care. Undercarriage. Oh. Takes me back. Food brings back memories. I have such great memories of this style pizza. Oh my god, they're just all flooding back right now.
Chef Twan and Bill's recipes brought back my memories as well. That's why I want to deep dive both of their recipes at the same time. Welcome to my first time ever double cooking video review. The main reason I want to do this double review is because of something crazy. Both Bill and Chef Twan have created nearly identical looking doughs using different recipes and different appliances. Bill used a stand mixer with a paddle attachment, not the dough hook. Chef Twan used a food processor. They both went for a 50% hydration, but Bill used the all-purpose flour and Chef Twan used semolina and bread flour. Chef Twan went with kosher salt. It's unclear whether Bill went with kosher, sea salt, or regular table salt. I'm guessing he went with table salt. But it does appear that Chef Twan is using just a little bit more. In a later video, Bill reduced his salt just slightly, and it was still good. Personally, I prefer having less salt in my dough and more salt in my toppings, but that's just a personal preference. I had to pull out the calculator and do a little math. I multiplied Bill's recipe by 2.2 to line up with Chef Tuan's. Combining that with some things I've learned, I realized they both might be using a little too much yeast, but I'm not sure. I've learned a few things recently that have made me take a little pause and rethink this. To explain why it matters, I'm going to pull up a little content from Vincenzo's plate.
7 grams he's putting in there. Again, that's 21 grams of fresh. So can you imagine getting 21 grams of fresh yeast in that amount of water right now?
You can make pizzas for 200 people.
No, you can make pizzas in about 20 seconds.
Wow.
If I'm going to use refrigeration, I would normally use up to maximum 3 grams of fresh. And then so I would cut it back to 1 gram of dry. So already at 5 to 7 grams, what's going to happen is that dough is going to rise instantly.
Within a few hours.
Within a couple of hours, it's going to be like...
If you want to make the pizza on the same day, that's what you do.
Yeah, and if you want to drink water all day, that's what you do.
Okay.
So,
Well, this additional information does not tell us how much yeast to use. It does tell us that too much can cause dehydration, maybe some stomach issues. I've been hearing a similar sentiment from other content creators, and bearing all of that in mind, I'm going to start trying to use a little less yeast and see how it goes. Before I continue my deep dive into Chef Tuan and Bill's recipes, I want to show you a little something that I'm going to be doing at the end of the video. I'm going to create my own pizza using a little bit of a mashup, some of the ingredients from each of their recipes, and some of their techniques for cooking and mixing. I'm confident that this will be the first of many experiments, but to kick things off, I'm going with the all-purpose flour like Bill, but I'm taking out 60 grams to leave room for some semolina flour. I've done tons of different experiments with Chef Tuan's recipe over the last many months, and that semolina adds an amazing flavor to the dough. And while my pizzas didn't turn out quite like Chef Tuan's, it was actually Bill's video that taught me what I was doing wrong with Chef Tuan's recipe. I wasn't using a food processor, didn't think it'd be a problem to use the KitchenAid with a dough hook, and I made the same mistake with Bill's recipe. Like myself, Bill used a stand mixer, but he used the paddle attachment. I made the same mistake again and used the dough hook. After that, I used Bill's recipe just the way he did it. I used the paddle attachment, came out perfect. I'm assuming if I followed Chef Tuan's recipe with a food processor, it would have as well. Like Bill and Chef Tuan, I'm going with a 50% hydration, and while I typically go with the kosher salt for this recipe, I'm just going to use everyday table salt. In the future, I'll probably go back and forth and maybe even skip the last ingredient and the salt as well and just go with a salty pork fat. I currently have 2 jars of the instant yeast, so I'm going to go with that this time. In the future, I may use the active yeast. Also, I'm going to go with less yeast than either Bill or Chef Tuan used. I'm going to go with 4 grams. I think it's going to be enough. We'll see if it works. Bill used warm water and sugar to activate his yeast. Now, Chef Tuan went with honey and warm water just to make sure his instant yeast was alive. If you know your instant yeast is good, you can just skip the sugar or the honey altogether. For the last ingredient, Bill uses corn oil and Chef Tuan uses butter. I've never used corn oil before, but for future experiments, I may give it a try, but for this recipe, I'm going with 60 grams of butter. That's just a little bit more than a half a stick of butter. Both Bill and Chef Tuan achieved a kind of crumbly, shaggy dough. Chef Tuan added his water in relatively quickly, where Bill slowly dribbled it in, then let the dough rest for just a little bit, then turn it back on and added in his corn oil. Chef Tuan incorporated all of his dough together and then gave it a good knead. Bill did a no-knead recipe. He put it all into a plastic bag, just smushed it together, and they both recommend putting the dough into the refrigerator and letting it cold ferment for at least 24 hours. For these videos, Chef Tuan went with 48 hours, and Bill went with 24 hours before rolling, and then put it back in the refrigerator for another 24 hours, incorporating a step referred to as curing. They both gave their doughs a nice super thin roll, not too thin, but just right. And then Chef Tuan did something that Bill did not. He pulled out a tool called a docker. It puts in little holes into the crust to prevent big air bubbles from forming, and if you heavily dock the pizza, pretty much no air bubbles. At this point, I need to acknowledge I haven't lived in the Chicago area for 30 years. Back then, we didn't call it Tavern Style or Cracker or Crust. We just called it Thin Crust and just happened to live near the Chicago area. I describe the crust as flaky, crispy, and a little chewy on the inside. And that's the way my favorite restaurant made it, Jake's Pizza. But others think differently.
We're going to do something called docking the dough. I have a dough docker. This is not a medieval like torture device or weapon. What this does we want to poke tiny holes into the dough. And the reason that what that is, it's going to help release steam. And that steam is not, it's going to help this crust stay thin and not have air bubbles. We don't want air bubbles with this. We want this to stay cracker thin.
I've made plenty of super thin cracker crust pizzas over the years. Here are a few examples. I often heavily docked my doughs just like Billy did, and to be fair, my pizzas may not have been as good as his, but they came out delicious, they're awesome, I enjoyed them, but not a single one of them ever reminded me of the type of pizzas that I got growing up around the Chicago area. But thanks to Bill Cook and Chef Twan, I'm really excited and I'm pretty sure that page is getting ready to churn. Next, let's talk a little bit about something that Bill did. It's called curing. I didn't even know there was a term for this. I've been doing it for years. In restaurants, we unintentionally did this. We stretch out a bunch of dough in advance of the rush, put them on pizza screens, stack them on up, and if business was slow, they dried out a little bit. When I bought my first pizza oven, I found doing these things in advance and stacking them up on the rack, letting the bottom layer of the crust dry out a little bit, helped with sliding it into the oven. It also allowed me to prep in advance so I didn't lose heat in the oven between pizzas. Bill placed his dough between 2 layers of parchment paper. Put it back in the refrigerator for 24 hours. That allowed it to ferment just a little bit more, but also to dehydrate just a little bit. This likely reduced the hydration of the dough from 50% probably down to about 40%. It also sounds like 2 of the most popular pizza places in Chicago cure their pizza shells as well. I don't know how they do it. I don't know if they do it the same way, but this definitely is a thing. Okay, now let's dive into topping. Bill went with a bit of a thicker sauce. He did a quick no-cook recipe using some canned products, some seasonings, and a little bit of salt. Chef Tran cooked his pizza sauce and started off pureeing 1 can of San Marzano tomatoes. Combine that with a variety of spices and a touch of honey. I'm a big fan of San Marzano tomatoes, and I'll probably do something very similar. Bill went with my favorite go-to, hand-shredded whole milk mozzarella cheese. Chef Twan started off with a little hand-shredded pecorino. That's gonna pump up the umami just a little bit more, add a little bit of saltiness. I love it. Also, he did something I've never seen done before. He cubed up this whole milk mozzarella. I'm confident that'll work, and it's gonna add a little extra creaminess to the cheese, but a contrast in textures. I'm definitely trying that. It appears that Bill went with some drained off, pre-cooked Italian sausage. It's a great way to cook your pizza if you want to make it just a little less greasy. I prefer the extra flavor from the raw, but I occasionally do it that way as well. Chef Twan went with the raw sausage. He doctored up some Italian sausage you bought from the store. I do the same thing. I always add a little extra toasted fennel. It just gives you that flavor you need. I sometimes add a little chili flake as well. If my main supermarkets carry ground pork, I'd probably just make this myself every time. But it's not always convenient to go to my favorite Asian grocery store or a butcher shop. I absolutely love Johnsonville, and it surprises me that they've yet to come up with a Chicago-style Italian sausage. Something that appeals to the flavors that we love. If you like this idea, feel free to screenshot this picture that I just doctored up and attach it to an email. Give them a call. If you want to go old school, you can actually send them a letter. Let them know that if they make it, you'll buy it. Chef Twan did his cook in the Uni pizza oven. He admitted that he went a little high on the temperature, maybe got a little aggressive on the cook for the bottom of the pizza. He had that stone at 700 degrees. And I'm gathering he's likely going to drop it down to maybe around 600 or so on his next cook. Bill cooked his pizza inside in a standard oven at 470 degrees until it was done. Both methods yielded awesome results. And I think Bill Cook and Chef Twan deserve high praise for their awesome videos, their awesome techniques, and bringing to light how to truly make an amazing Chicago thin crust pizza. Alrighty, it's time to find out what I truly learned from the masters as I attempt to recreate the style of pizza that has brought joy to countless families all across the Chicago area. I started off with a great success getting an awesome shaggy dough. My instant yeast was good, so I skipped testing it with warm water and sugar. I went ahead and just mixed up all my dry ingredients on the lowest setting, and then I pinched in cold butter before I added the water. When I added the water, I just slowly drizzled it in over the course of a few minutes. The end result looked so good that I made a whole nother batch so I could freeze some for the future. Like Chef Twan, I went with the San Marzano peeled tomatoes. I sprinkled in a little dried basil, thyme, oregano, marjoram, a little garlic, a little salt, a little bit of sugar, not too much. Unlike Bill and Chef Twan, I did not use tomato paste. I didn't use a blender. I hand crushed those tomatoes, and over the course of an hour, I cooked off a bunch of the water at a medium-low temperature, which left me with an amazing, delicious, thick pizza sauce. After that, I did over a half dozen different sausage experiments and came up with a brand new idea. I'm not going to do this every time, but I found a better way to get pre-cooked sausage using parchment paper and my Ninja XL Pro air fryer/oven. Now, I prefer cooking with raw sausage, but if you're going to do a really quick cook in a pizza oven, might not be a bad idea to just play it a little safe. I did a bunch of experiments in my air fryer oven, trying to figure out how thick the crust should be, quantity of toppings I should use, and if cooking inside required using the pizza stone. Ultimately, what I learned is that it doesn't matter whether you use a stone or don't use a stone. It's near impossible to get that crust exactly the way you need for this type of pizza and that type of the oven. It's just not hot enough. In future videos, I'm going to test this in my Expert Grill wood-fired oven and on my Blackstone griddle top as well. To get the best results in an air fryer oven or a regular oven if you don't have a pizza stone, I suggest cooking in stages, starting off with just the sauce until that crust starts to get a little crispy, then your raw toppings when they're cooked through about halfway, then add in your cheese and your cooked toppings, and you're on your way. It won't be what I would consider a true Chicago-style thin crust, but it will be delicious. I definitely recommend checking out Bill and Chef TUAN'S full videos. I'll put links to them in the video description, as well as all the recipes. Thank you so much for swinging by, and if you like this video, please hit that subscribe button, and y'all have a fantastic day.